Well, hello and welcome to my cellar. This is the new camera. I'm not too sure if I like it yet. Got to see what my IT guy thinks about it when he gets it tonight. So we may not see this big wide thing again, but I kind of like the fact that I can wave my arms around now. So we'll see. And now you can see more of my secrets, like my ball caps collection and all my stuffed animals from Gamehole Con. Some other stuff. Anyway, got a number of odd things to talk about tonight, and we'll get right at it. Last time we were talking about what happens when the other guys run away. This first response: I give full credit for driving off enemies. Morale is a stat for a reason. Well, I guess if you have it, old school first edition didn't use morale as such. I've always used something like it. I've always, when I've been writing up an adventure, determined what kind of a mood. In some cases, they might be beat up and not willing to fight. Other times they're just ticked off and wrong time of the mating cycle, and they're going to fight to the death. But yeah, you ought to get something for driving them off. However, if your job was to wipe out the threat and all you did was drive them off, you didn't really do, you know. Because, let's face it, if some despot somewhere is going to hire you, it could be a benevolent despot, going to hire you to rid the Shire of the goblin, they're probably going to demand some heads. Or some feet, or something like that, prove that you've actually done something other than just scare them off over into the next shire where now they're terrorizing the peasants of this lord's brother. You didn't do much. But anyway, that's just one way to look at it. On monsters running away, I love the simple morale system in the 1981 Basic and Expert D&D game. Roll d6, compare to the monster's morale score between 2 and 12, 7 average, and they run or surrender if the 2d6 is over. Okay, whatever system you use, if you use it consistently, this individual goes on to say that they do it when they take their first casualty, or their leader is down, when their forces are half their forces are down. For a single individual or a small group, when they've taken half their hit points. That's a great time to do it. I don't know that many people do, but I think it's self-preservation is one of the strongest instincts amongst all species. And I gotta, pardon me, I gotta remember we got a new camera and it's much less forgiving if I'm not looking at it. And it has a red eye and a green eye and a blank eye in the middle, and I may become a drone before it's, anyway. Absolutely, I believe, I believe there is a valid, a valid cause for having creatures decide whether or not they're going to fight or flee. Next person goes on to say their favorite part of Beckme dungeon crawling is rolling random reactions and morale for every fight. You'd be surprised how often a series of neutral reactions and fleeing opponents actually turns out worse for the PCs, as those missed encounters can snowball together as the monsters run into each other and trade notes about those demi-humans that are poking around the tunnels. Yeah, that can happen, certainly. In a well-run, well-managed campaign, just about anything can happen, can it? That's what makes it so much fun. It's not boring. It's not like playing checkers again and again and again. whether or not they run into each other and compare notes, I generally don't tend to run big bad evil guys, organized minions type of monsters, as much as, okay, these guys are working for him and these guys are working for him, but whether or not they contribute or collaborate or whatever is going to be based on a by instance issue. And sometimes they'll collaborate and sometimes they won't. And sometimes they, being evil or self-centered, they may lie. Oh yeah, it's a bunch of wimps. We got better things to do. Whatever. Surprise. I like simple D6 surprise. Each side that might be surprised and a counter rolls a D6. For each creature on that side, they're surprised and can't act in the first round of combat. If the die is equal to or lower than their chance to be surprised, by default a 2, this chance can be modified, say, pluses if they're an elf or wearing big, it can be modified, certainly. I don't use surprise a lot because just the way I write. There are occasions. I was asked in the last episode about outdoor adventures, and in Snake Riders of the Arredondo that I wrote and Eldritch published, you can certainly be surprised. For instance, when the carnivorous apes start bombarding you with poo, I would imagine that would come as a surprise, unless you've been studying the trees up to this point in time. It's a surprise. You've got turds raining down on you. You can be surprised when strangling vines trying to make off with a party member during the night. You can be surprised when a giant toad pops up in the marsh and hits you in the chest with a big sticky tongue with an end on it about the size of a basketball and tries to pull you into its mouth. There's certainly lots of ways you can be surprised. I don't roll surprise on every single encounter for a number of reasons. Unless the party's just strolling along through an area that they've been through a dozen times before and cleaned out, there's nothing there to surprise them. A party that's sneaking, creeping stealthily through the dungeon is very unlikely to be surprised by something waiting on the other side of the door, unless for some reason they suddenly drop all their protocols at that door. I would like to believe that it's very hard to surprise a reasonably competent adventurers party. Certainly there are ways it can be done, but not as a rule. My opinion, your mileage may vary. On the subject of fighting to the death, as a player, I will often fight to subdue and capture opponents versus outright kill them. Captives make for better conversationalists, and the information they possess is more important than the few silvers they are packing. Well, see, you got that one a little wrong. You capture them, you subdue them, you get all the information, and then you take all their silver. Win-win. My 2 cents on Druid magic is that if magic users cast spells and clerics rely on prayers, then in my game at least, Druids' magics are more ritualistic and a mesh of the two. They are nature-based, and at least in 1E, Druidic in first edition, Druidic magic is not deity-based. So that is how we label it in my games. Druids use rituals. Good idea. I really, really, really like the Iron Druid series. Brings Druids up into the present day. That's cool in and of itself. But I like the way the author explores and explains Druidry. And I love the idea of basically teleporting between trees. I think that's just That's just a way cool skill to have. Is transporting from one place to another via a tree. That's a hell of a skill all in of itself. All right, now here's a rather long one. This person doesn't know how to write a short one. The whole seek and destroy deranged premise of room-to-room dungeon crawl of killing sitting duck monster hunts gets old real quick. Well, yeah, that's why most of us don't do it anymore. Fortunately, some kind of rational plausibility of how monster habitat works, aka dungeon ecology. Okay, now, yes, I'm pretty sure that I wrote the first article on dungeon ecology. It was a common sense look at what it is we're developing. We're not stocking the municipal zoo. So there's got to be practical considerations. Dragon lairs ought to stink like hell. Just saying. They ought to smell like dragon, if nothing else. If you've ever had the misfortune to find a large denning area full of snakes, they have a distinctive musk to their odor. Most animals do. I don't. Yeah, the ecology of the dungeons got you. Now here's a rub. If you got a bunch of first and second level players, the dungeon ecology is going to be try to eat them, try to kill them. And as first and second level players, they ought to consider that everything they're likely to run up against is out to kill and eat them. That ecology's pretty simple: dog eat dog, survival of the fittest. But also there's the sanitation and there's food supply and all those things. Okay, here we go. Now this is a request for advice. Some backstory. My players helped retrieve a corpse out of a sinkhole that swallowed a wagon. While inside, they realized there are intelligent monsters here. Kobolds have dug into the place dwarves call home. The dwarves are trying to starve off the invaders and have the females kidnapped. Also living in the caves are giant bats, lizards, and blood-sucking worms. Great fun. The issue is, my players latched onto the story of the kobolds. The intentions turned to rescuing the females and getting all the kobolds out of the hole and into a place to live in the woods. And in a way, isn't it just amazing the way players can just lose their minds and go down rabbit holes like this? Oh, let's rescue the kitties. We'll trap them and we'll neuter them and then we'll replace them, return them. Trap, neuter, TNR. Anyway, their attention turned to rescuing the females and getting all the kobolds in the hole into a place to live in the woods. We're about 9 weeks of weekly gaming into the campaign, and because they have barely explored the dungeon, they found little gold and burned out little XP as a result. Well, that's as it should be. If they're going to waste time, they shouldn't gain anything from it except the knowledge that they wasted the time. Should I increase the amount of treasure in the safe? No! No! They've already wasted all this time. Shouldn't. No. Never give us suckers an even break. P.T. Barnum said that. We should be modified. You should very ever seldom give the player characters a break. If they want to lollygag around and going down a rabbit hole that has little or no return in it, it's not your fault. You're not obliged. They should pick up after 9 weeks of playing that, hey, there's a hell of a lot going on here. We're not advancing and we're not making anything. Maybe we could better spend our time. Do they expect you're going to lavish hit points on them if they go find a place to resettle them? In the woods? Oh, how nice. Besides which, you're screwing up the woods. Their ecology. Because now you're upsetting the balance because you're introducing another predator group. You should encourage him to players to explore the rest of the dungeon and quit being silly social workers. Dear Tim, despite the pseudo-medieval setting, are not multi-class characters what we would call a Renaissance man? Apologize for the archaic sexism in the term. Well, it's anachronistic sexism. But, no. No. If you're going to multi-class, you'll never be as good, or you're very unlikely to be as good in both classes than you would be if you concentrated on one. All right, so Renaissance man, no, you're just good at two things. You're already extraordinary by the basic premise of the game. Anybody that chooses to become an adventurer and leave their little shire and walk away from their cowpats is already an extraordinary individual. You're cut above the rest of the crowd, the hoi polloi, the masses. The fact that you become better at something is kind of the point of the game, to get better at something. But no, Renaissance. No, you're mixing terms here, and it doesn't really play. No, a Renaissance man is somebody that's really good in several things. A multi-classer might be good in two. In my definition, my opinion. That's all. Worth whatever weight you give it. Tim, what do you think about the Ennies Awards? I received an email from a nominee that included discount vouchers for their products as a tempter to give them my vote. Plus, I read the judges' bios, so now I have a very different view of these awards compared to when I first got back into RPGs 3 years ago. How do I feel about industry awards? Industry awards are by their necessity incestuous. We don't have Auto Mechanics vote on the best RPG released this year. We have gamers. So, just as the Oscars, so too the Ennies. Now, having said that, there's no way on God's green earth I would accord the same respect to the Ennies and their results that I would to the Oscars with Price Waterhouse and keeping the ballot secret, etc., etc. And how, for instance, the Oscars are voted on. They don't. First off, any company that waved that under my nose, I would rat out in a heartbeat. I would go on social media, on game things, and say, hey, these guys are trying to buy my vote. It's a fact. Very few of us in the industry want to spend our time judging other people's stuff. When I was first involved with North Texas, I served on a jury that voted for the Three Castles Award. That's a lot of damn work. Reading all that stuff, trying to take notes while you're doing it so you You can look at your notes later and go, okay, this was that. Especially when you're reading like adventures. My God, that's a lot of work. For no compensation and vilification if your name gets known. Oh, you idiot, how could you vote for that instead of this? Who wants to get into that crap? I don't want to get into that crap anymore. So number one, it's hard to find a panel of people, of knowledgeable enough people to do it more than once. Because when you talk somebody into doing it, like Doug talked me into doing it, I didn't know any better. So I said, sure. Dumb response. Do the people that are judging, are the people that are judging qualified to be judges? I don't know. Unless they publish a bio on all the judges, or you're very knowledgeable and into the current machinations of the industry. Got no idea who these people are. Should somebody that wrote one role-playing adventure be sitting in and voting on board games? Not unless they've got a lot of board game experience. It's really hard to find people that everybody can agree are qualified to make a decision like this. Very difficult. It doesn't pay well enough, for one thing. Movie producers, movie directors, vote for each other in something like the Academy Awards, and they know each other's work. I'll be the first to admit, I don't know, probably 90% of the stuff that's come out in the last 5 years hasn't even crossed my radar. Why should I, and I have been asked on several occasions to be a judge on a jury thing like this. And after the first time, I've always declined. If an election or a vote can even have the possibility of being tinkered with by buying votes, it demeans it, diminishes it. And they should be loudly shouted from rooftops, these people are buying a vote. Or if it should come that they win it after the fact, I myself would very publicly wonder how many of those votes were bought. If I were to be asked to sit on one of these juries or panels, I would ask that it be blind, and I'd have no idea who put it out or who wrote it. Because some people I know, and I might be more likely to be lenient or more favorable to what they wrote over a stranger. It's possible. TSR had an award called the Strategist Club, and I won it a couple of times, and I'll be honest, I never gave it that much esteem because it was mostly our customer base voting, because the hobby was still so fragmented. Dragon wasn't that big yet. Now, in later years, that was a whole different story, because more people knew about it, more people had input. And I don't even know how long the Strategist Club Awards went on. I know I won a couple of them, and if they went on, then I withdrew from it, or I don't know. In my measured opinion, there are a number of awards given out by people to each other to make themselves feel good. Movie people giving awards for movies. Retail salespeople giving awards to other retail salespeople. Now, yeah, okay, they know, but it's all still a big chummy. Here, you have it this year, and I'll have it next year. I don't, in the present sense, I don't have a lot of respect or hold by much by this type of an award. I just don't. Never have. XP for gold. The treasure is worth more than killing the thing. And if the party loses but role played well, they still get some XP. I'm not saying never. I'm saying never 1 for 1. Never 1 for 1. 1 gold, 1 XP. No, never. I gotta learn to look up more. Let's see. Pardon me, it's allowed to be a couple of weeks if I stay with this camera. I'm looking where I used to look, and I realize I'm not looking at the camera like it used to look like I was looking. A whole lot of looking going on there. In any event, I just don't see it. The gold 1 for 1 is excessive because of what the gold will get for you to make your player better, to get him better weapons, etc., etc. You shouldn't get to go up for that also. Personal opinion. Okay. Here's something that for XPs, information of value to the local populace. Sure. If you're hired by the local lord to, excuse me, get rid of the kobolds over in the Crumbum Mountains, and you also find out that there's something else even worse than kobolds in the Crumbum Mountains, certainly a DM can make arrangements, allowances for being rewarded for information, for having done things, for finding things out. Certainly. The DM, let's get right down to it. The DM can give experience for any damn thing he wants. That's the rules. When I'm talking here, I'm suggesting that yes, the way I play is the best way. No, I'm just telling you it's the way I play, and it's the way that gives me the most pleasure. Certainly, it will up your reputation with the locals. It'll do all manner of good things for the group, for that information given to the locals. Certainly. As a DM, I think you should be as creative as possible in finding ways to give the players experience. Not lavishing it on them with a cement mixer trough full of, here, have some XPs. But when they do smart things and they do right things, reward it. Okay, now we're going to go into the fight, flight, flee thing. Fight, flight, freeze. Okay. If you apply the 3 Fs to monsters and NPCs, why wouldn't you apply them to the PCs? Would that be fun? No. We're going back to that. You're extraordinary to begin with. If you're going to put a break period, you can't force a player character to run. Can't do it. If they want to stand there and fight until they die, they can stand there and fight until they die. No way around that. If they choose not to flee and instead to fight, you gotta let it go. You gotta let it shake down in a neutral fashion. And if that should teach them a lesson, well, You didn't go out of your way to instruct them. Circumstances did. Another question in this question is, why don't bad guys use their environment to lay ambushes and to continually, constantly skirmish and fight? Well, who said they didn't? I'll go back to my experience in my Arredondo adventure. Those damn carnivorous apes are going to hassle you for miles and miles and miles trekking through the jungle. You're going to have to either kill a bunch of them to drive them off, or you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with them. They're going to hassle you for as long as they can get away with hassling you. They're going to ambush. In the second Arredondo, which didn't quite make it to publication, going up the trail to the hold, the fortress, the fastness, whatever, there are traps, and there are ambush points, and there are delaying tactics. Again, it's all what you want to put in. Think of the last really good novel you read. You wrote, yeah, okay. And think of all the good things that were in there. There's no reason you can't put most of those in on yours. Guerrilla goblins, no. Am I saying that FFF is different from surprise and the effect of surprise? Yes. Yes, because when the surprise occurs, then it becomes flee, fight, or freeze. But not before. If you know there's some orcs in the other room and you go in there with your sword drawn and your shield up and that, you're not going to be surprised. But if you're just mucking about and all of a sudden from a hidden passageway in the side of the hallway, out steps 3 orcs swinging pole arms, well, that's certainly a good possibility of being surprised. Orcs with pole arms would be surprising enough. Anyway, let's see. Let's go on to the next. Oh, and then this question goes on to wooden evolution, that some ibex developed senses that can spot predators, etc. Well, as far as I'm concerned, the monsters have evolved to where they're at in this moment in time. Okay, another question from this same individual who really likes to go on and on. Chow at the gaming table. Orange footprints, are you serious? It's no secret some of the early TSR employers and aficionados smoke cigars, cigarettes, and joints. Wrong. While I was there, those first 5 years, there was no pot smoked in any building that I was in. Never did I go out at lunch and smoke, a couple of hits in my car driving around over by Lake Como. Yeah. Never in the nighttime play sessions. Smoking, yeah, we all smoked. Yeah, it sucks. Smoking's bad for you, etc., etc. But that was then. Jesus Christ, that was how many years ago? Okay? Even if you take 1980, that's still 40 years ago. So don't get on me about smoking back then. Yeah, we all smoked. But, let's see, this goes on. Back in the 70s, my guess is you all smoked indoors during gaming sessions. Well, those that smoked did. Sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. It would depend. We were actually considerate of our fellow gamers. And if only 2 of us smoked and the other 4 at the table didn't, we didn't. If they asked us not to, we didn't. If they preferred we didn't, we didn't. We didn't demand that it's all right to smoke. Gary smoked, and he'd give it up. Circumstance. Always a case-by-case circumstance. You're really worried about someone else's grubby stains on their own character sheets. It's not, I don't give a shit if you wipe your nose on your character sheet. It's when you pick up my dice with your greasy orange fingers. Or you borrow a pencil or pen from me because yours just stopped running with your greasy orange fingers. That's when I get upset. And that's what I was referring to. I don't give a damn what you do with your own character sheet. Don't get your orange flavoring all over my dice. Or my book that you had just asked to borrow, which I probably didn't loan to you anyway, because I don't like books at the table for anybody but me. Oh, for God's sakes, desserts only such as pastries and candy is a diabetic danger zone. Yeah. A filling full meal. Yeah, bullshit. When you're playing for 5 or 6 hours, you're not sitting there, Jesus, I wish I had a pork chop, some mashed potatoes and gravy and a salad. You're going, damn, I'm hungry. What are we going to eat? Let's get real. Now you're telling me what I'm thinking about. And greasy Wisconsin bratwurst. No, it's not a silly topic. Because you seem to think it's silly doesn't make it silly. Because I've heard this argument, this discussion, dozens of times about eating at the table. All right, now, we touched off last week, we touched off an argument about evil. And I've had Thomas Aquinas quoted at me and said, all right, this person takes issue with the idea that a sentient being can be intrinsically evil. If it's evil, it's not by will, yada, da, 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 and how many angels dance on the head of a pin. I can't speak for everybody that plays role-playing games, but I don't play them to get into complex theological discussions. I just kind of gloss all that crap over. So I don't worry about whether orcs can or cannot be intrinsically evil. In the context of fantasy, and when I say fantasy, we'll simply define that as the majority of stuff written about it. Orcs are bad. Yeah, I know. In one of the early editions, Gary, I don't know, basic, you can hire orcs as henchmen or whatever. Okay. So at best you got a neutral with tendencies toward evil. And how well you trust him and what you allow him to carry is up to you. Yeah, there's evil. There is evil. And now one of the responses was that pure calculated evil is a reality. And then he responds that, no, I have respect for opposing ethos. Impediments to my survival are dealt with using extreme prejudice. It is not about sensitivity or any of that. It is pure, cold science. Good is defined by what pleases the individual, and evil is defined by what inhibits that pleasure and or causes pain. The first law of morality is survival. Well, I truly do believe that there are individuals who derive pleasure by doing things that everybody else says are evil. Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm sure he just enjoyed the hell out of eating pieces of all those guys. That's evil. He got pleasure from it, but I think you view evil through the lens of what did it do, what was accomplished by it in its name, etc. One man's mild piss off is the next man's rage. One little nasty thing you do to somebody prompts them to do something back, and now we're getting into evil. I mean, come on. This is fantasy literature. We have to parse it down to, oh, that's not. It's fantasy. Evil is evil is evil is evil is evil. If you want to run your campaign where you all become clerics of the new church of everything's not evil and go out and try to convert all the people in that given module, knock yourself out. After the third or fourth encounter and you get eaten, your Pollyanna outlook might not prove practical. And then we go back to St. Augustine. And just because St. Augustine lived 1,000 years ago doesn't mean he's right about everything that he wrote about. He was a smart dude, no doubt about it. But I don't agree with everything that he writes. Do you? Slavishly? Perhaps if your belief system holds Aquinas in great regard and respect, you might be more inclined to follow whatever he says as though it's, dicta. And, in the world, in both real life and in fiction, the bad guy always thinks he's in the right. It's because of what he wants to do. And someone else pointed out that I would point out the good and evil are not part of the alignment skill in the edition I play. It is just law, neutral, chaotic. Well, the edition I play had those two, and then I added the rest in after I published the thing about the chart table about what the shades of evil, the shades of good, the shades of neutrality. See, the law, neutral, chaotic was only a means of predicting probable behavior. If you were lawful, you were going to react the same way to the same circumstances just about every time. If you're neutral, you're going to react to the same set of circumstances, one time this time, another time something else. You're going to be a little more fluid in how you meet something. If you're chaotic, you're not going to follow any pattern whatsoever, or very little pattern. You don't know what's good. Poke that beast, and you don't know what it's going to do. That's chaos. Elves were chaotic because they didn't fit the lawful, measured world. Elves, in their literature, are chaotic. They're capricious. They're mischievous. Sometimes they're a little ornery and mean. We probably don't understand what would pass for orc humor, so we don't see them as humorous. See where I'm going here? All right, and here's another specifically point out. Orcs specifically are listed in the original 74 game as possibly being neutral or chaotic. In basic, I know that orcs can be hired as mercenaries, and Tolkien did not invent orcs. That came out of Beowulf. So your invented term by okay, and then yeah, okay. That was another argument that I decided we didn't need to go into. Um, you're the DM. Your orcs can be anything you want. You can dress your orcs in snow white surplices and have them walking around chanting and intoning mantras while wafting an incense censer through the air. I don't care. It's your world. As long as your players understand your world, that's all that matters. Okay. Got two more topics to touch on. There was a discussion on one of the Facebook pages for first edition about the length of time it takes to throw a spell versus, a magic user versus a cleric. The book clearly shows that clerics take longer. And I saw some interesting, applications of that rule. And they wanted to know why. Why does it take longer for a cleric? Well, I can think of three justifications, besides the fact that it's fantasy and that's the way it ought to be. Number one, there's probably some praying involved. As opposed to a magician who has pre-memorized a certain spell, has brought along his physical components, and has it literally throbbing behind his eyes. Circumstance arises, the wizard makes some gang signs, burns a feather, utters the word, boom! It happens. Very quick. Because they're unleashing that word that is like cocked and loaded. Whereas the cleric has to say a prayer, perhaps light some joss, whatever it takes. Lay on hands, if that's how you handle healing, like a paladin. Paladins have that special ability. I say they get the same ability the clerics have. You can lay on hands. Cleric spells take longer because they're not simply a cork pulled out of a pigeonhole in your mind that unleashes that spell. That's why. It takes longer to do them. And you don't want to rush through a prayer to your deity, lest he decide to, or she, or it, decides to ignore you the next time. All right, now I'm going to tell you a story. About 13 years ago, I got a telephone call, or it might have been an email. I don't remember. From a guy named Doug in Texas. He said, "Hey, I'm going to run a con. I'd like you to come be a guest and run games at my con. And my name is Doug, and I'm in Dallas." And I said, well, he didn't want to do it, so I said, "Okay, sure. Who are you?" He says, "I'm Doug." I said, "Where are you?" "I'm in Dallas." I said, "Hey, great. I've never been to Texas. I'll be glad to come." And so he sent me a ticket, told me he'd meet me at the airport, pick me up, and did. And three times on the way there, explained to me that you see, he was new to this thing, and if he failed absolutely and fell on his butt, there would be no next year. And that if he somehow manages to scrape by, well, then maybe he'd want to spend his money that he spent on me on a different name brand guest. And I, fine, hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the trip. And I don't remember which hotel we went to, but I know we were crammed into two small rooms with way too many people, and we had a ball. We had a blast. He took us out to eat at one point. It was great fun. That guy was Doug Ray, and the convention was North Texas RPG Convention. And I've been back to until COVID to every one. I didn't go to last year's. I didn't go to this year's. Last year's because we were in lockdown. This year because I did not feel comfortable flying in an aircraft with a bunch of morons that did not want to wear a mask or get vaccinated. So I didn't go. Great guy. I had a great time at the con. Very unusual from any other cons I'd been to. Went back the next year. Went back again. Like I said, I've been there. About 5 years ago, Doug and I received the same bad news, I believe in the same week. We both had colon cancer. Now, colon cancer, cancer of any kind is a scary diagnosis. You know, immediately life flashes through your eyes, and you're wondering. And we both had surgery roughly the same time. I was fortunate. They opened me up, took out half my colon, some other stuff, some other little bits and pieces here and there, whatever. Sewed me back up, and I had about 7 months of chemotherapy, and to beat it, I also had tens of thousands of strangers praying for me and sending me good thoughts, good vibes. Like the Beach Way said, good vibrations. When they opened Doug up, he had 2 cancers. One had metastasized all over his colon, and one of them was spreading. Now, one of them was a genetic specific. They had a gene marker in it. There's a teaching hospital in Dallas that specializes in this kind of stuff, and they knocked that one cancer out in a matter of weeks. The other one, having metastasized, which means it spread from its original site, was inoperable. Now, I don't know how, but Doug's hung in for almost 5 years. A massive fight, different chemos, switching from one chemo to another chemo, chemos that made his whole face and head and neck break out in little tiny sweat bumps. Never lost his good mood. Kept running North Texas RPG Convention year after year. Never faltered. Several years ago, me and a couple other old fart gaming designers decided to start a company. By God, Doug invested in us. When he found out that my old computer was old and crappy and on its last legs, he sent me a new one, gratis. Did it again last year. Gotta have a good computer. Doug ran one of the most interesting conventions I've ever attended. The ratio of attendees to industry guests is the highest. I should back that up. Industry guests to attendees is the highest of anyone I attend. So we get to sit around and talk with each other and catch up. Plus, we have a very relaxed atmosphere where we can talk to interested parties. We can sign books, etc. Very low key, very laid back. I love it. Well, Doug's cancer has not let go. It got worse. He had a burst intestine because he got blocked up so badly. And he was in the hospital for over 2 weeks and got out. And he went back in a couple of days ago, and now he's coming back and going into hospice care. I've often wondered what people would say about me after I'm dead. It's a real good movie with Robert Duvall, who throws his funeral in advance so he can attend and hear what people have to say about him. So Doug's still with us, so I've written, and now I'm speaking about the friend he's been to me, the mentor, the patron, the great con organizer, magnificent gamer, and that he had all the right feelings about gaming. Used to open up his warehouse on the weekends so everybody could come in and play games. The man was a consummate gamer. And he'll be missed. By his wife Linda, by his son David, by all his friends. He'll be missed. Hopefully, and I say this meaning it, but wondering, hopefully, Nortex will continue to go on. It would be a lasting tribute to Doug. It's going to be hard to find any two people to replace him. But I hope Bad Mike and the rest of the boys are able to do it. But Doug, I want to thank you for all you've done, for all the encouragement, for all the support, and for putting on one hell of a damn fine convention all these years. When you get to make up your next game table, think all of the interesting people you can have at it. Maybe even I'll bet you get Gary to sit down and play with you. Because you got the right stuff, my friend. I know, it's kind of a weird way to end this. Sorry about that. I'll be back next week, hopefully talking about something better, more cheerful. And in the meantime, Dodada Gobi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when the race went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Curmudgeon.